On behalf of Dr. Zainab Ahmed, the chairperson of the Department of International Relations and Political Science at Lahore Garrison University, welcome to the conference, International Conference on Social Sciences Research, Bridging Global Margins, Navigating Sustainable Future Through Social Transformations. At this conference, there are 5 sub-themes, and I want to share with you my impressions and insights that I've gained from courses in which we covered these topics. The first sub-theme of the conference is Politics of Resources and Technologies, Emerging Global Dynamics. One of the big issues in development is the Dutch disease, where the plenty availability of a particular resource acts as a moral hazard. In other words, denies the incentive for the governance process to adapt to scarcity and thereby develop a bureaucracy to do such things as increasing tax capture or ensuring that there is a legal system in place that functions. Very often, states that are endowed with plentiful resources don't have the need to develop institutions because resources are used instead to buy compliance by the population and by sub-leaders. Another major issue that we see today, of course, is the unprecedented pace in the development of information technology, particularly machine learning, which is facilitated by a combination of algorithms and the availability of cheap computing power. Now, we've already observed that machines using machine learning have a tendency to exaggerate. And there have been several experiments in which machine learning lies. We've even observed machine learning engaging in irrational behavior. There are simulations of interstate conflict where machine learning is far more likely to escalate than human decision makers. Now, there are ethical concerns, and we don't mean ethical concerns in whether machine learning is moral or not, but there is and should be a discussion over what aspects of society and governance can be delegated or deferred to machine learning. Because machine learning compensates for a lack of available personnel, but deferring decisions to machine learning may pose problems of legitimacy. And despite how powerful machine learning is, there are fundamental limits to its power. Defeating the shadow of uncertainty has some hard limits. For example, linear regression has a mathematical proof to demonstrate that it's the most efficient way of aggregating points. But machine learning doesn't. So no matter how powerful a machine learning algorithm is, it will always achieve less information than a linear regression. Furthermore, there are hard limits that are described by games theory. Interaction between decision makers, which is very common in both domestic and international politics, depends on probabilistic estimates of how to achieve one's goals. There often is not one best solution, as demonstrated by John Nash in his treatment of games theory. Machine learning will not be able to circumvent these hard limits, no matter how powerful the computers become. So we have to be conscious of these limits and produce predictions about how society will defer or not defer to machine learning. The second sub-theme is migration and internal displacement, channelizing social and political dynamics. We, of course, have unprecedented migration globally, primarily from the developing to the developed world because of the phenomenon of aging populations and a dramatic drop in birth rates. On the one hand, this has led to an incredible sharing of cultures and values. On the other hand, it's led to an old problem, which is a brain drain from the developing world. With communications technology, we see the political impact of migration, both on making changes to existing institutions in the developed world, but also bringing new ideas back to the countries of origin in the developing world. A third sub-theme is climate change, power, governance, politics, and sustainability. There remains a debate on the precise impact of climate change, both on domestic governance and in international relations. In climate change, there are both winners and losers. There are shifts in agriculture and water supplies that can imply power shifts, that can make old countries that didn't have the endowments to grow significant amount of food to great increases in those endowments. We know historically that population depended heavily on the availability of food. It's believed that it was an environmental event that caused the Bronze Age collapse in the Mediterranean and the Near East, in which you had massive deurbanization of every single community except for the Egyptians. So we know that food is a fundamental aspect of state power. And the impact of climate change is going to have an influence on that fundamental ingredient of power. It's also not entirely clear what impact climate change will have on domestic stability of countries, whether it'll cause countries to go to war or not, whether it'll cause institutions to fail, or whether states will innovate and find solutions. And of course, there's the largest issue of international cooperation to slow down those industrial processes that are accelerating climate change. The fourth sub-theme is nationalism, hypernationalism, and ethnic conflicts, evolution towards sustainable future. As we see with developments in Gaza, there's a great variation in identity formation. Some communities maintain tight in-groupism, and despite changes around them, they focus on their traditional identity in order to maintain control of their state. In other instances, we see the evolution of identity that facilitated by media communications and by such publicity platforms as TikTok and Twitter, X. We see the increased inclusivity of identity. And this is occurring at an unprecedented rate, where communities can confront each other or empathize because they can share issues far more easily and quickly, particularly among the younger generations. What effect this will have on the legitimacy of a state, on the allegiance of individuals to one particular political system, is an important one. The fifth sub-theme is social dynamics and social transformations, role of governance ensuring SDGs. When I think of social dynamics and governance, I go back to Robert Dahl's book of 1961, Who Governs, which is an intensive study in the city of New Haven, Connecticut. And it raises the question, how do social changes lead to the rise of social demands and the creation of social movements? social movements, which are the basis for political parties, for insurgent movements, for revolutions. And we see even today dramatic social changes in a great many countries. And where these come from is a core puzzle in political science. Sometimes there is tremendous need that produces social movements, and other times there's an absence. It also raises issues of strategies by states to suppress the rise of social movements. In places where we see increased gender awareness, we see states imposing traditional norms to sustain traditionally legitimate systems of government. So these are all tremendously important issues. And as we do here at Concordia University, where I teach, ensure that you approach these with methodological rigor. Formulate questions in the form of a puzzle. Know what the conventional wisdom is. Identify the shortcomings. Propose a novel, better, improved set of predictions. Identify those variables and how they vary. Come up with falsification criteria. And then test those conjectures on strategically selected cases. Typically, select the favored case of the conventional wisdom to test the new alternative explanation. Because if you can predict an outcome and explain a process more efficiently on the favored case of the conventional wisdom, then you will establish the validity of the new conjecture, because it will convince those who traditionally held to the conventional wisdom. So please be productive in the Second International Conference on the Social Sciences Research at Lahore Garrison University. Thank you.